This is Tony Felice, host of the Santaland podcast. First off, Santaland is not just a book, it's a frequency. It's a place in your mind where everything's cool and everybody loves each other and there's lots of adventures that go on. Fairy tales we know from the past, great literature, that sort of thing. And for season 1, we talked about my book and a little bit of the creative process. And this season is about you. And so my gift to you is I'm going to, do one of my little tricks and that I can do. And that's that I can read things I've never seen before and do the character voices and all. So join me each week as I read a chapter from classic literature, doing character voices and all live with the mistakes, dog interruptions, planes flying over, husbands that forget that the light is on the outside of the door. None of that matters because it's really about the real experience of just, kind of talking to you. Each week there's a sort of intro and a recap and a story arc, hopefully, that is something that is meaningful to you. If any of this sounds exciting, then join us every week on all your favorite podcast platforms. And I look forward to seeing you there. Thank you so much. Also, if you're an author and you have a book that you'd like me to read and maybe have you on the show, you can reach me on my website. Thank you for joining us on Santaland. Modern fairy tales for adults that like to listen. Hey there, and welcome back to the Santaland podcast. I am so glad that you're here. Tim and I are in the Redwoods, and I'm coming to you live from there. So please forgive any dogs barking, or I hope you can't hear the refrigerator humming behind me, but it's sort of fun to be here, and it's so beautiful, I have to tell you. Some of the trees are like as big around as a bus, and they form caves, and it's like a cathedral. The sunlight coming through them in the morning is absolutely incredible. And you can hear them creaking. I swear I heard creaking in a tree. Tim was with me. It was a dead tree. Out of nowhere, it started tapping. I swear it sounded like Morse code. So we laughed, and we like to think it was my mama or his coming to us, knocking on the tree, saying, I love you. I'm glad you're here. I had a dream that my mom told me that we needed to get a rig and that we needed to spend more time in the Redwoods. And so that's what we've done. And so Tim's working right now. You should see, he's sitting outside. He's got his big computer on the picnic table, and he's surrounded by redwoods and a rushing river. It's really awesome. All my dreams have come true. That's why I created Santaland, really, because I wanted to share my joy. And yeah, there's hard times. Trust me, we do have hard times, but we get through them, and I love how we get through them. I'm so grateful to have the person I have with me, especially at this age of my life, having someone you can trust and count on. In a sense, both of us, the way the world was back then when we grew up in the 1970s, 80s, 90s, we had to be different people. And so we're leaning into our new identities, this feeling of freedom and just being ourselves and hanging out and working through life's issues, in a sense, trying to become a real boy like Pinocchio, or a real girl, like Pinocchia, because really it's a genderless story. And that's it may be genderless, and I have to go back on that a little bit, though, because there is some patriarchal stuff here as far as the lying goes, of course. As I did a little research about the fact that Pinocchio's nose grows. I mean, we know it grows, right? And that could be a metaphor for karma. Even when Geppetto chops it off, it keeps growing. and he's made of wood. And I'm thinking, okay, there's a lot more here. Trust me, I think that you'll see that there's a lot of like commentary on class and the judicial system and the ridiculousness of, you know, society's constructs. Those things I think are really apparent. But one of the things that isn't really talked about is this whole idea about the nose. And where does that come from? I know the book was written by an Italian in the late 1800s. And so I did a little research about, what is this whole thing like? What is Italian lore or fable around the face or the nose? And I'm Italian. And I have experienced people in my life who've lied to me. And coincidentally, they have had big noses, come to think of it, every one of them. But that's a stereotype. That's just how I see it from my lens, But anyway, what I found out is that in Italian culture, there's a long-standing belief that who you are leaks out of you. Italians say things like, and forgive my pronunciation, "Gli se legge in faccia," you can read it on his face. "Ha la faccia di uno cemente," he has the face of someone who lies. So I think he pounds that idea mercilessly in this book. If you remember, because Pinocchio lies, lies, lies. It's not about the lies, though. It's not about the fact that lies are naughty. It's about the fact that falsehoods cannot remain hidden. And that's the reality. We all know that. And then there's a whole thing with the trees. I mean, this metaphor, trees, I think of them as the whales of the plant kingdom. Honestly, I mean, they record our history. I watched a YouTube video where they looked at lumber from medieval times, 1200s, across continents. And the rings in the lumber all matched the rings on trees that, everywhere. That they record climate change. They record stress on the environment. They record fire. They record all kinds of things are written in the rings, almost like a record player. Right? Sorry, I had to take a drink because I do read live. And that's part of my trust with you is there's no gimmickry here. I'm going to try to do my real best. I really am. And get through it in a take without screwing up. But anyway, without belaboring the point too much here, I wanted to just have you guys think about those two things. But the nose growing, Italians think of the face as it's like you can't tell a lie. Your face tells the truth. Also, I believe we speak telepathically, but we don't realize it. Because, how many times has someone said what you were thinking, right? I think we're all on a wavelength, they say. And Pinocchio is not on a wavelength. Well, he is on a wavelength. He's on a wavelength of destruction and learning lessons the hard way. And isn't that kind of a drag? So anyway, let's try to all be the kind of people who never lie, right? Never say falsehoods, because there's 4 rules to work at my agency, and the first one is be impeccable with your word. The next is don't take things personally. The next is don't assume things, and the other is to do your best, meaning be accountable. Because if you're impeccable with your word, that means that if you're accountable, you say you are, and that's the kind of people we want in our lives, right? And that's who Pinocchio is trying to become. So we're going to pick up on chapter 3, and let me see where we're at. Chapter 3, and here is where Geppetto comes home with Pinocchio. So here we go. Chapter 3. Geppetto, having returned home, begins at once to make a puppet, to which he gives the name Pinocchio, and the first tricks played by the puppet are demonstrated now. Geppetto lived in a small ground-floor room that was only lighted from the staircase. The furniture could not have been simpler. A bad chair, a poor bed, and a broken-down table. At the end of the room there was a fireplace with a lighted fire, but the fire was painted, and by the fire was a painted saucepan that was boiling cheerfully, and sending out a cloud of smoke that looked exactly like real smoke. As soon as he reached home, Geppetto took his tools and set to work to cut out the model of his puppet. "What name shall I give him?" he said to himself. "I think I'll call him Pinocchio. It is a name that'll bring him luck. I once knew a whole family so called. There was Pinocchio the father, Pinocchio the mother, Pinocchio the children, and all of them did well. The richest of them was a beggar." Having found a name for his puppet, he began to work in good earnest, and he first made his hair, then his forehead, then his eyes. The eyes being finished, imagine his astonishment when he perceived that they moved and looked fixedly at him. Geppetto, seeing himself stared at by these two wooden eyes, took it almost in bad part, and said in an angry voice, "Wicked wooden eyes, why do you look at me?" No one answered. He then proceeded to carve the nose, but no sooner had he made it than it began to grow, and it grew, and grew, and grew, until in a few minutes it had become an immense nose that seemed as if it would never end. Poor Geppetto tired himself out with cutting it off, but the more he cut it, it shortened, the longer that it did become. It was an impertinent nose. The more he cut it and shortened it, the longer it began to grow. The mouth was not even completed when it began to laugh and deride him. "Stop laughing!" said Geppetto, provoked, but he might as well have spoken to the wall. "Stop laughing, I say!" He roared in a threatening tone. The mouth then ceased laughing, but put out its tongue as far as it would go. Geppetto, not to spoil his handiwork, pretended not to see, and continued his labors. After the mouth he fashioned the chin, and then the throat, and then the shoulders, the stomach, the arms, the hands. The hands were scarcely finished when Geppetto felt his wig snatched from his head. He turned round, and what did he see? He saw his yellow wig in the puppet's hand. "Pinocchio, give me back my wig instantly!" But Pinocchio, instead of returning it, put it on his own head, and was in consequence nearly smothered. Geppetto, at this insolent and derisive behavior, felt sadder and more melancholy than he had ever been in his life before, and turning to Pinocchio, he said to him, "You young rascal, you are not yet completed, and you are already beginning to show your want of respect of your father. That is bad, my boy, very bad." And he dried a tear. The legs and the feet remained to be done. When Geppetto had finished the feet, he received a kick on the point of his nose. "I deserve it," he said to himself. "I should have thought of it sooner. Now it's too late." He then took the puppet under the arm and placed him on the floor to teach him to walk. Pinocchio's legs were stiff, and he could not move, but Geppetto led him by the hand and showed him how to put one foot before the other. When his legs became flexible, Pinocchio began to walk by himself and to run about the room, until, having gone out of the house door, he jumped into the street and escaped. Poor Geppetto rushed after him, but was not able to overtake him, for that rascal Pinocchio leapt in front of him like a hare, and, knocking his wooden feet together against the pavement, made such a clatter as 20 pairs of peasants' clogs. "Stop him! Stop him!" shouted Geppetto. But the people in the street, seeing a wooden puppet running like a racehorse, stood still in astonishment to look at it, and laughed and laughed and laughed until it beats description. At last, as good luck would have it, a carabiner arrived, who, hearing the uproar, imagined that a colt had escaped from his master. Planting himself courageously with his legs apart in the middle of the road, he waited with the determined purpose of stopping him, and thus preventing the chance of worse disasters. When Pinocchio, still at some distance, saw the carabiner barricading the whole street, he endeavored to take him by surprise and to pass between his legs, but he failed signally. The carabiner, without disturbing himself in the least, caught him cleverly by the nose. It was an immense nose of ridiculous proportions that seemed made on purpose to be laid hold of by carabiners, and consigned him to Geppetto. Wishing to punish him, Geppetto intended to pull his ears at once. But imagine his feelings when he could not succeed in finding them. And do you know the reason? It was that in his hurry to model him, he forgot to make the puppet ears. He then took him by the collar, and he was leading him away. He said to him, shaking his head threateningly, "Will you go home at once? And as soon as we arrive, we'll regulate our accounts, never doubt it." At this announcement, Pinocchio threw himself on the ground and would not take another step. In the meanwhile, a crowd of idlers and inquisitive people began to assemble and make a ring around them. Some of them said one thing, some said another. "Poor puppet," said several. "He is right not to wish to return home. Who knows how Geppetto, that bad old man, will beat him?" And the others added maliciously, "Geppetto seems a good man, but with boys he is a regular tyrant. If that poor puppet is left in his hands, he is quite capable of tearing him to pieces." It ended in so much being said and done that the carabiner at last set Pinocchio at liberty and conducted Geppetto to prison. The poor man, not being ready with words to defend himself, cried like a calf, and as he was being led away to prison, sobbed out, "Wretched boy! And to think how I labored to make him a well-conducted puppet! But it serves me right. I should have thought of it sooner." What happened afterwards is a story that really is past all belief, but I will relate it to you in the following chapters. I'm trying to get Geppetto's voice. Oh, it's more like, let me see, my grandfather's like, "Aye, aye, Geppetto, aye, Geppetto." So his voice is more like, "Aye, Geppetto." Okay. Aye, Geppetto. Chapter 4. The story of Pinocchio and the talking cricket, from which we see that naughty boys cannot endure to be corrected by those who know more than they do. Well then, children, I must tell you that whilst poor Geppetto was being taken to prison for no fault of his, that imp Pinocchio, finding himself free from the clutches of the carabiner, ran off as fast as his legs would carry him. That he might reach home the quicker, he rushed across the fields, and in his mad hurry he jumped high banks, thorn ledges, and ditches full of water, exactly as a kid or a leveret would have done if pursued by hunters. Having arrived at the house, he found the street door ajar. He pushed it open, went in, and having secured the latch, threw himself seated on the ground, and gave a great sigh of satisfaction. But his satisfaction did not last long, for he heard someone in the room who was saying, "Chirp, chirp, chirp." "Who calls me?" said Pinocchio in a fright. "It is I." Pinocchio turned round and saw a big cricket crawling slowly up the wall. "Tell me, cricket, who may you be?" "I am the talking cricket, and I have lived in this room 100 years and more." "Now, however, this room is mine," said the puppet, "and if you would do me the pleasure, you will go away at once, without even turning around." "I will not go," answered the cricket, "until I have told you a great truth." "Tell it to me, then, and be quick about it." Woe to the boys who rebel against their parents, and run away capriciously from home. They will never come to any good in the world, and sooner or later they will repent bitterly. "Sing away, cricket, as you please, and as long as you please. For me, I have made up my mind to run away tomorrow at daybreak, because if I remain I shall not escape the fate of all the other boys. I shall be sent to school, and shall be made to study either by love or by force. To tell you in confidence, I have no wish to learn. It is much more amusing to run after butterflies, or to climb trees, or to take the young birds out of their nests." Poor little goose! But do you not know that in that very way you will grow up a perfect donkey, that everyone will make a game of you? "Hold your tongue, you wicked, ill-omened croaker!" shouted Pinocchio. But the cricket, who was patient and philosophical, instead of becoming angry at this impertinence, continued in the same tone. "But if you do not wish to go to school, Why not at least learn a trade, if only to enable to earn an honest piece of bread?
Do you want me to tell you? Replied Pinocchio, who was beginning to lose patience. Amongst all the trades in the world, there's only one that really takes my fancy.
And that trade, what is it?
It is to eat, drink, sleep, and amuse myself, and to lend a vagabond life from morning to light.
As a rule, said the talking cricket, with the same composure, all those who follow that trade end almost always either in hospital or in prison.
Take care, you wicked ill-owned croaker. Take care, you wicked ill-owned croaker. Woe to you if I fly into a passion.
Poor Pinocchio, I really pity you.
Why do you pity me?
Because you are a puppet, and, what is worse, because you have a wooden head. At these last words, Pinocchio jumped up in a rage, and snatching a wooden hammer from the bench, he threw it at the talking cricket. Perhaps he never meant to hit him, but unfortunately it struck him exactly on the head, so that poor cricket had scarcely breath to creak, 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 and then he remained dried up and flattened against the wall. Okay. Chapter 5. Pinocchio is hungry and searches for an egg to make himself an omelette. But just as the most interesting moment comes... Let's start that over again. Pinocchio is hungry and searches for an egg to make himself an omelette. But just at the most interesting moment, the omelette flies out of the window. There are these little summations at the top of each chapter, and so that's what I read. So if it sounds weird, the transition, just know that there's a short paragraph up at the top, and then the story begins. Night was coming on, and Pinocchio, remembering that he had eaten nothing all day, began to feel a gnawing in his stomach that very much resembled an appetite. But appetite with boys travels quickly, and in fact, after a few minutes his appetite had become hunger, and in no time his hunger became ravenous, a hunger that was really quite insupportable. Poor Pinocchio! He ran quickly to the fireplace where a saucepan was boiling, and was going to take off the lid to see what was in it, but the saucepan was only painted on the wall. You can imagine his feelings. His nose, which was already long, became longer by at least 3 fingers. He then began to run about the room, searching in drawers and in every imaginable place, in hopes of finding a bit of bread. It was only a bit of dry bread, a crust of bone left by a dog, a little mouldy pudding of Indian corn, a fish bone, a cherry stone, in fact, anything that he could gnaw. But he could find nothing, nothing at all, absolutely nothing. And in the meanwhile, his hunger grew, and poor Pinocchio had no other relief than yawning, and his yawns were so tremendous that sometimes his mouth almost reached his ears. And after he yawned, he spluttered, and he felt again as if he was going to faint. Then he began to cry desperately, and he said,
"The talking cricket was right. I did wrong to rebel against my papa and run away from home. If my papa was here, I should not now be dying of yawning. Oh, what a dreadful illness hunger is!"
Just then he thought he saw something in the dust heap, something round and white that looked like a hen's egg. To give a spring and seize hold of it was the affair of the moment. It was indeed an egg. Pinocchio's joy beats description. It can only be imagined. Almost believing it must be a dream, he kept turning the egg over in his hands, feeling it and kissing it. And as he kissed it, he said,
And now, how shall I cook it? Shall I make an omelette? No, it would be better to cook it in a saucer. Or would it not be more savory to fry it in a frying pan? Or should I simply boil it? No, the quickest way of all is to cool it in a saucer. I'm in such a hurry to eat it.
Without loss of time, he placed an earthenware saucer to a brazier full of red-hot embers. Into the saucer, instead of oil or butter, he poured a little water, and then the water began to smoke. Tack! He broke the eggshell over it, that the contents might drop in. But instead of the white and the yolk, a little chicken popped out very gay and polite. Making a beautiful little curtsy, it said to him, "1,000 thanks, Master Pinocchio, for saving me the trouble of breaking the shell. Adieu until we meet again. Keep well, and my best compliments to all at home." Thus saying, it spread its wings, darted through the open window, and flying away was lost to sight. The poor puppet stood as if he'd been bewitched, with his eyes fixed, his mouth open, and the eggshell in his hand. Recovering, however, from his first stupefaction, he began to cry and scream, and to stamp his feet on the floor in desperation, and amidst his sobs he said,
"Oh, indeed, the talking cricket was right. If I had not run away from home, and if my papa was here, I should not now be dying of hunger. Oh, what a dreadful illness hunger is!"
And as his stomach cried out more than ever, and he did not know how to quiet it, he thought he would leave the house and make an excursion into the neighborhood in hopes of finding some charitable person who would give him a piece of bread. Wow. Okay, so because Geppetto was all mean to those boys all the time, the people just assumed he was at fault. Okay, so you got to be careful about how you present yourself to the world. You got to hold your anger in and not show who you are sometimes, because people will assume that's who you are. I remember the stories about Judy Garland. Liza asked her once, she said, "Mama, why don't you tell the world that you're not some crazy drugged up person, that you're a great mother and you're a cool person?" And Judy says to Liza, she said, "Honey, because that's how they want me. See, that's my job. Here's the best advice I can give you. Give the people what they want and then go get a hamburger." When I heard that, I laughed so hard. Tim came running in from the other side of the house. He heard me laughing so hard because it's so true, right? It's so true. But that works both ways, right? She was able to earn a buck, a big buck, based on people assuming she was this fragile thing, right? So, but Geppetto has to go to prison because all the people thought that he was going to beat up this puppet the same way he was beating up these boys in the past. So reputation is everything. The next thing is Pinocchio doesn't want to be accountable for anything, right? We talked about that before. Be impeccable with your word. Well, that means be accountable for the words that you say. That's pretty. That hits, you know. And then he meets the cricket, and you know how I feel about crickets. He doesn't want to hear the truth. Pinocchio doesn't want to know what he already knows, right? Because at the end of the day, when you screw up, doesn't it really feel like you remembered that? When you look back, you go, wait a minute, didn't I do that before? Why did I do that again? Maybe that's what's happening. And so now, here we have a boy who has entered the world with karma to pay off. That's why his nose keeps growing. Why is he born that way? We had to ask our question. Why is he born rebellious? What does that signify? That's pretty deep. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. But here he thinks he's manifested his greatest desire, this egg. But because he has karma, it's an egg, but it's not the egg he thinks it is. That's kind of deep too, don't you think? If you lie and you cheat, and then you think you get what you want, you realize what you want flies out the window. Because it's just an idea. I think maybe that little chicken represents that. I'll have to look that up and see what other people think. But think about that. You know, chicken soup, chicken, sustaining, life, sunshine, right? Chicks are yellow, polite. Here's this thing that enters the world in terror, being broken over a saucepan, but is polite and kind. And here we have Pinocchio, cut from wood, who has lies to share. So I think maybe Pinocchio's job is not to become a real boy, as much as his job is to reveal to us what our true natures are. and how we can break out of our own stereotype. And you know me, I hammer love all the time. I say the answer to every question is love. And that's tough for some people because you realize you got to forgive, and you think that's all about giving them something they don't deserve. But no, it's giving yourself something you're owed. You're owed to just let that go. To just let it go. I'm trying my best to, my mouth gets me in trouble sometimes, but it also makes a lot of things happen. And I try to constantly be the best person I can. Inside, I'm a comedian, and I'm also an introvert. And so it comes out as humor. And sometimes that humor is ironic, clever, or whatever Tim says. I don't know but it always is like, it's like a comedian. It's like a one-liner. I can't help it. Her hair framed her face like parentheses surrounding a superfluous comment. I read that once. Now I can't look at a bob cut ever again. I think that's F. Scott Fitzgerald. Bernice bobs her hair, something like that. I remember. Again, about identity. Wow. Think about how many things are all about identity. Who we are. And how the world always is a better place when we ask ourselves that question instead of everybody around us. Or who we pray to. So I'm going to leave you with that because I love you guys. And I'm so happy that you're with me. It's 3:20 in the afternoon. Let me put this computer back on. We're at 30 minutes. Wow. I still got to get Geppetto down. Oh, Pinocchio. Oh, Pinocchio. Ah, Pinocchio. More gravel. My grandfather used to say, his joke, Italian joke, which makes no sense to anybody in America. He said, what does a wolf like to eat? And the answer is carne. Well, that's Italian for meat. But it's too literal, so I don't laugh. So there's got to be hidden meaning there that only he knows. But he would say that gravelly voice. My grandfather had a gravelly voice. I want Geppetto to be kind. He has a character arc. So he starts off as mad as hell. He wants the life that Pinocchio wants. But he thinks that he has to make a puppet to get it. And Pinocchio thinks he just gets it out of hand. So ain't that something? Anyway, I hope you join me again. And I love you guys. Thank you so much for tuning into the Santaland podcast. That's all for now. Thanks. Bye.